For the Wild podcast is made possible through the generous support of the Calliopeia Foundation. We are so grateful for their continued support in our work, as well as many other like-minded projects that believe in the immediate need for taking physical and spiritual responsibility for the vitality of our common home.
Welcome to For the Wild podcast. I'm Ayana Young.
But for God's sake, let's not be so concerned about people's perceptions, and let's get down to reality. If we don't speak up and put a stop to this, then our air, our lands, our waters would all be polluted, and what kind of life would we all have?
Today we are speaking with Cinta Kaipat, who is of the Refaluwash-Chamorro descent and is an advocate for indigenous Refaluwash rights, preservation of indigenous cultural practices and beliefs, and promotion of responsible environmental stewardship in the Marianas. Ms. Kaipat is an attorney. She is a former Assistant Attorney General, a former Congresswoman, and a former hearing officer, an administrative law judge, as well as a former Deputy Secretary for the Department of Labor. She founded Beautify CNMI, a grassroots environmental organization which won an EPA award in its first year of existence. Co-founded Pågan Watch, a watchdog organization formed to protect Pågan and help promote the resettlement of the former residents displaced as Mount Pågan's eruption in 1981, and co-founded the Alternative Zero Coalition, which was newly formed in 2015 to advocate for and protect the Mariana Islands, especially Pågan and Tinian, from irreparable destruction at the hands of the U.S. military and its allies, which intend to turn their sacred inhabited island homes of Pågan and Tinian into target practices using live fire bombings and heavy artillery shellings. Well, welcome, Cinta. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us this deeply important information that many of us just don't have any access to in mainstream media.
Hello, Tiro, Hafaday, Ayana. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you on this program and to share this very important information that is affecting all of us who live here in the Mariana Islands.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to begin at the heart of today's topic by reading a quote of yours I came across while researching the proposed militarization of Pågan. Quote, "If the Navy's plans go ahead, they will turn our homeland into a militarized wasteland, and we will never be able to return." End quote. And so I'd like to start this conversation by exploring the ongoing and immediate threats faced by the islands of Pågan and Tinian, both of which are part of the Northern Mariana Islands. So Cinta, can you share with our listeners why the U.S. military wants to acquire Pågan and what they intend to do there? And how is life on Tinian radically transformed already due to the United States military's presence?
Well, first of all, Pågan is key to the whole build-up. When the United States and Japan agreed to reduce some of the presence of the military in Japan, in Okinawa, they decided to split up the number of Marines and send some to Hawaii, some to Australia, some to Guam. So that basically is what they call the tip of the spear. They made that decision to send the military to Guam, which is 200 or so miles south of Saipan. And at the time that this decision was made, the Navy issued a statement that they would not need any more places to train the Marines outside of Guam. And this is important because they had to comply with NEPA requirements that basically said that they had to reveal not only what the plan was, but the comments, and they were supposed to look at alternative trainings, and this was designed to allow the people a chance to learn what was going on or about to happen in the community. And if there was something that they did not agree with, that this would give them a chance to air their concerns with their leaders, their local leaders, and bring this to the attention of the military so they can resolve things. Well, apparently the Navy blatantly lied because they said that they did not need any more training outside of Guam. And meanwhile, they were already planning 2 other trainings that were to happen, and that the 2 training ranges, the live fire training ranges that they did not review at the time, were announced later, and those 2 ranges were planned for where I live, which is the Northern Marianas. One such training range involves Tinian. And the way that, if you look at this whole thing, the Navy was slick because they realized that they would most likely receive a lot of opposition to them turning this whole region into the world's largest live training bombing complex. And so they decided to break down the plan into 5 separate standalone training ranges and try to avoid the opposition that way, because this way they don't have to comply with the NEPA requirement of taking into consideration and reporting the cumulative impact of all this that was going on. So, for instance, the trainings that are supposed to happen on Guam, the level of training increases in intensity and volume in every way imaginable, in the level of the types of trainings that they will be doing. That increases in intensity and in variety of ways when they reach Tinian. And then, just summarizing this whole thing, and why is it that they want Pågan? Let me go back to our political history when we were deciding whether we wanted to, what our political status would be in the 70s. The commonwealth status is what the people eventually voted for, to become a permanent commonwealth, part of the United States family. And in that negotiation to become a part of the United States family, we agreed to give up 2/3 of Tinian to the U.S. military. We gave up an entire island called Furland in Indonesia, which the U.S. continually bombs even today. We gave up part of the Tinapak Harbor. Pågan was never, ever discussed as being contemplated to be included in our negotiations to become a part of the United States. So the promise for Tinian was that the U.S. would take 2/3 of the island, and people would live on 1/3 of the island, and they would build a military base there. They would provide job opportunities for the people. They would allow the residents access to the schools and to shops and restaurants and whatever other amenities that would come along with providing for the families of the U.S. soldiers who would be relocated on the base. None of that came to pass. None of that happened. No base was ever built. So the U.S. agreed to lease part of that land to the farmers so that the cattle can graze on the land. So what got people really upset today is the fact that now the military is coming around and they're talking about wanting to use Tinian as a live fire bombing range instead. They're talking about, for example, they want to set up artillery firing range, tank maneuver range, amphibious-assault beaches. Basically, what this translates into, there's a lot more that they want to do there, but in terms of the impact on the people of Tinian, there's about 30,000 plus people living there. That means that their access to the beaches where they go and fish, because the farther away that you get from the capital island of Saipan, the more expensive the goods are. So they need to fish to not only continue their cultural practices, but also to supplement their income, feed their families. So the military will be closing off access to the beaches that allow the people to fish for their subsistence. And there are other areas on the property where the people go to collect medicinal plants. Also, every year, the people of Tinian host what they call the Pica Festival, which is the hot pepper festival that draws thousands of people to that tiny island every year. This is a great opportunity for them to generate some income. And in the past, I know that this issue has been raised as far as cutting off access to these hot pepper plants in the wild that the people collect. And they also collect and sell them. Tinian is known for their hot peppers, and they sell them in stores. So the remark that one of the spokespersons for the military had basically said, which was really insulting, was, well, if they can't get to it, I'm paraphrasing, get to it, then maybe it's time for them to get with the modern times. And basically what he was saying is, we're backwards people that are still living in the dark ages, and we're not up with the modern times or modern life. So, it's that kind of disrespect for the people and the culture. So people were upset about that. And the other thing that recently happened is the establishment or the signing of the agreement for the divert airfield. What this will do is it would open up a field on Tinian to receive overflow of aircraft from Guam. And if you can imagine, not only would the people be bombarded with the noise level from all the artillery shellings going on in Tinian, but then you add to the mix the noise pollution from the aircraft that will be landing and taking off from this tiny island. And just having the people be forced to put up with all this on the 1/3 of that island. Try to imagine school children trying to concentrate to hear their teachers over the loud noises of howitzers going off or airplanes trying to take off or land. Imagine the elders who are still suffering from traumatic experiences of World War II and them hearing all this noise. Animals being frightened. There's just so much that is a source of concern. So imagine all the intensity of this training happening on Tinian. Then you move that to Pågan, where the military is they are hell-bent on trying to get this entire island. This is my childhood home. I have precious memories of living on Pågan, going to school in a two-room schoolhouse, just going on school picnics where we got in a boat and we went to a beach on the other side of the island and pulled the boat ashore to the lagoon and going around in that lagoon picking mangoes. Just fruits, and even learning to fish. Imagine this very serene, quiet place being turned into just a hellhole. Because what's going to happen is the Navy is planning to hold the highest impact, the full spectrum of their military training on that island. I'm talking about everything from amphibious training to bombs from the airplane and shelling the island from the ship and sonar testing in our waters. It's incredible. It's just unbelievable to imagine this kind of fury being unleashed on that island that the people, my people, have been trying to return to since they were last evacuated from that island in 1981 after the volcano erupted. And now we are fighting this David versus Goliath battle because we are clearly outfinanced, and these people. We're just a small island community with people. We're just ordinary folks. We're not trying to fight the military because we are unpatriotic. If you look at our records, you'll find that a lot of us have families who are either active or who were active in the armed forces and served the different branches of the military. I have two nephews who came home in coffins from the Iraq War. And they are missed every single day. Every life is precious. I'm not saying that other lives do not matter, but I'm saying that the impact of losing someone in these small communities just reverberates, wider. And I just want to make that clear to people who accuse us of being anti-U.S. or anti-military. I never said anything about giving up my U.S. citizenship or my passport or anything like that. But people often bully us when we speak up and say, hey, guys, this is not good. What you're planning to do to our islands is not good because it's not healthy. You're exposing us to a lot of danger health-wise, and you're putting a big target on our foreheads, by choosing our location to have these large-scale military trainings. And people, some of our critics are quick to point out that, we're so grateful to the military when the super typhoons came and just basically leveled some of our islands, parts of our islands. And how could we be so ungrateful to that? But you know what? There's gratitude for what the military has done. No doubt about it. We thank them. We'll always be grateful. But how far does that gratitude extend? Think of it this way. This is an analogy that may be crude, but I say, you have a doctor who saves your life because they operated on you to remove your gallstones, but then you're so grateful that you tell the doctor, hey, it's okay to kill me so you can discontinue to practice your surgical skills. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's what extent, to what extent?
How can you turn away? Don't you care? Don't you care how I feel as if all that we shared, a moment's comfort disappeared? Is nothing we said really real? Safe in arms, no one could harm us, protecting honor, trust, and respect. A moment's comfort disappeared. Is nothing we said really real? Oh, a friend.
To take action this week and support Cinta's work, First, please call and write to your members of Congress. While Northern Mariana Islanders are citizens, they have a non-voting delegate in the House, which means that it is critical that we continue to remind our representatives that what happens in the Northern Mariana Islands matters. You can find your congressional representative's contact information at whoismyrepresentative.com. Second, though the comment period and petitions for Tinian and Pågan have passed, you can sign the petition on change.org to save Ritidin in Guam, which faces similar threats of militarization. You can find the link on our website or in the details section of this episode. Thanks for listening.
Judgment on me. How can you be so cold? Don't you know you are loved always, running and hide the wounded child within yourself, afraid of loving no one else? What have I done that you won't face me? See that your pain is inside of me, the wounded child within ourselves, afraid of loving no one else.
Cinta, you've given us so much to chew on so far, and I want to focus in on an area that you have mentioned. I really want to delve deeper into the ramifications of the military's presence. It seems like the military's training includes amphibious assaults, mortars, rockets, artillery, attack helicopters, and naval bombardment. And for many of us, this is something that is completely out of sight, out of mind. So I'd really like if you could share how the training would not only inevitably kill wildlife, exacerbate the endangerment of many species, destroy farmland, forest, and coral reefs, but also the ways in which the indigenous peoples, mostly the Chamorro, would have their access to cultural sites and food sources completely restricted. Now, I know you'd already mentioned about the beaches and the collection of the herbs and fish, but maybe if you could go into more of what happens there physically when the military begins attacking. What do you see in terms of complete destruction?
Well, take Ritidin or Ritidin, for example. When we started to clear the land, they destroyed cultural artifacts, lattice stones that are very iconic, symbolic, important pieces of artifact to the Chamorros. And that shows you the blatant disrespect that they have, military has, for the cultural artifacts of the people. So no matter what they say, because if you hear them talk, the military will tell you that they are the biggest supporters, or they are the best environmental stewards on the planet. And their actions speak louder than words. So that's a huge concern. Take Pågan, for example. There's an ancient village that still needs to be surveyed on that island. So when they start dropping the 1,000-pound bombs on that island, and they have all these other military vehicles, heavy military vehicles that they will be bringing to the island if they succeed. Because I continue to believe that programs like For the Wild help us to stand a fighting chance. So, assuming that they prevail in this insanity, they will be bringing amphibious vehicles that will run from the ocean up onto the beaches that would, if you take a look at some of the photographs of the beaches in Pågan, unfortunately, nature has taken its toll, and so there's a lot of soil erosion. So the beaches are suffering from erosion already. So imagine the heavy equipment that would be coming ashore. That would further speed up the erosion. And then, of course, they're going to be brought onto the land. For some of the concerns that we have is really avoiding what happened to Guam. In Guam, the Navy brought in the brown tree snake that has destroyed the bird population of Guam. So these are vehicles that would also be coming from Guam. So imagine if they're going to inadvertently introduce the brown tree snake and have the snake also destroy the bird population on the island. Imagine if they're also introducing some invasive plant species that would also take over and destroy the flora and fauna of the island. You know, these are possibilities, and so people are highly concerned because obviously whenever the military is about to conduct any sort of training, for example, for their bombing exercises, they come up from Guam and they fly over to Ferlundum, Indonesia, and they drop the bombs, carpet bombs on that island. And some of them end up in the waters. A lot of them actually have landed. These are unexploded ordnance that expose not only the marine life to toxicity, but the fishermen who go fishing. But whenever they are about to do these bombing exercises, they also send out a notice and they restrict the space, the airspace, the space around the area, water, and so forth. That affects people's movements. When the military talks about Pågan, they're mentioning only one island, but I disagree. I believe that they will be taking both islands on either side. Agregan to the north, which is really my birth island, and Alamagan in the south. These three islands today are the three islands that I have been working to help the people resettle since I returned back home in 1998 after going off to school. And they don't like to bring that up because it would just mean, more land and more requirements to adhere to, more NEPA requirements, which, we're fully convinced that they're just basically kind of going through the motions just to say that they were able to comply, but they're not really complying with the spirit and intent of the law. I think they're just, we're not convinced that they're sincere in their compliance. And so people won't be able to access those islands while the military is training, either of those islands. So can you imagine if the people are trying to move back to Pågan, for example, or any of those other two islands? Pågan, for example, is now at a stage where the government is finally recognizing the desires of the people to return home. And so just this year, the government, our Department of Public Lands, issued a notice that they were going to allow applicants to apply for homesteads up on Pågan. And this is significant because back during the trust territory times in the 60s, when people were living up in the Northern Islands, it was a time when there was, free movement, free flow of traffic back and forth between these islands. The people lived up there, and this is the 60s, around the time that I was living up there. I was born on Agregan, and eventually my family moved to Pågan when my father was elected as a congressman representing the Northern Islands. So the headquarters was on Pågan, and he was instrumental in being given some money, a budget, and he recruited the islands, men, women, and even my Peace Corps teachers, my first grade Peace Corps teachers, and they all got together to patch up the old dirt Japanese airstrip that had been heavily bombed out during World War II. There was a Japanese population living on Pågan at the time also, not just Saipan or even some of these other islands in the archipelago. But when they patched up that dirt airstrip. It reopened the air service to the Northern Islands since the end of World War II. And I recall that we had tourism up there where my 12-year-old brother used to lead. He was a guide that used to lead tourists to climb Mount Pågan. I used to stand on the front porch of our veranda and train the binocular up the volcano to gauge the progress. There were Japanese tourists, there were American tourists, there were people coming from everywhere. And my father was a big believer in agriculture, and that's what he specialized in when he was going to school at the University of Hawaii. So he came back and he had all these plans for us up in Pågan. He also was instrumental in bringing up the military actually from Guam. I believe this was 1971. They came up and they actually expanded that dirt airstrip. And they also built a dispensary. That's my first experience with the military was very positive in that these were people who were there to help the community. They were there to help rebuild the infrastructure. So, the military wasn't always this that I'm fighting today. I'm not opposing the military in the sense that I do not believe in making sure that they have a readily trained force to protect the nation, protect its allies. But my God, if you look at all the places that they could train in the world, why this very small, tiny island? Why bring so much destruction to our small rocks in this huge ocean? It just does not make sense to me. And all the thousands and millions of dollars that they're going to be spending to construct the training facilities and all that. I mean, when they have all these other training facilities that are already built and in place. So it just does not make any sense. And what they're planning to do is just going to radically change our entire lives, because we are a small tropical paradise that relies heavily on tourism. So who would want to come here to the Marianas when we are ground zero of the world's largest live fire training range? Obviously, we're not going to be appealing. Who wants to come here and instead of enjoying the serenity of the peaceful environment, they are hearing bombs going off and mortars and grenades and howitzers and so forth. It's just not realistic. And the other thing that concerns the people is the fact that when I talk about them putting out these restrictive zones, right now, Tinian relies on sending their patients to Saipan for the really serious emergency cases. But what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to divert their flight path, because they can't just continue to fly directly to Saipan from Tinian the way that they are doing now. So when your life hangs, it depends on the minutes or seconds to require patient in that situation to have to go around. It's too much. It's a lot to ask of the people. And mind you, these are the same people whose islands were fought over by the United States and Japan during World War II. It was from Tinian where they launched the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was these islands where they refer to as the Marianas Turkey Shoot, where there's so much heavy fighting in the air, and our people were caught in the crossfire of all this, and people starving and hiding out in caves and all this kind of stuff. And people should not continue to believe in the propaganda that the United States came here to save the Refaluwash-Chamorro from the Japanese, because that's complete hogwash. That's propaganda. People need to understand is that the United States fought to wrestle these islands from Japan because they needed a strategic place from which to launch the atomic bombs on Japan. It had nothing to do with coming here to save the Refaluwash and the Chamorros from the Japanese. So let's just be true and honest about that. So even with all the negotiations that we went through, and if you talk to the Carolinian or the Refaluwash negotiators, they'll tell you that, they just were not prepared to accept the commonwealth as the status that they should choose. But that seemed to be the status that was pushed and foisted upon them. But anyway, even after all the things that the people gave up to become a part of the United States, one of the most important things is that we continually do feel like we are the stepchildren of America. We are not given equal rights, even though America is big on brandishing its democracy and equal rights and all that. But we can vote for the president because we live here. We have to move to the United States in order to have that privilege. We do not have really a voice in Congress because our elected representative has no vote in the U.S. Congress. And so even though we are quote-unquote U.S. citizens, it's a watered-down version of that. We also know that the United States often looks at our status and they will say that we are U.S. soil if it's to the United States advantage, but we're not if it's not to the United States advantage. So we felt like we, in good faith, gave up what we could, as much as we could, to be adopted into the American political family. But, in practicality, we just were not accepted fully into that family. And so that always leaves a sting because our people, as I said, are patriotic. They serve in the military. They support the United States. I don't think that people, even back in the beginning, were 100% convinced that this was the right thing to do. And even today, some are still not convinced this is the right thing to do. But, our question is, how much is too much to convey our loyalty to being U.S. citizens and to be patriots? Because I think that, it's not fair that we're from this very tiny community and we aren't necessarily, yes, we do get funding. That's always thrown in our faces, and that we get grants and funding, disaster relief and all that. But who doesn't? Name me what state that does not really get that. Well, maybe Puerto Rico had some problems recently, but I'm just saying that we're not treated equally. That hurts us. And so that is a big source of concern for us, is the fact that we are being asked to sacrifice so much more. If you were to maybe go to Iowa and ask the people if they would ever accept the kind of military trainings that are being proposed for our backyard, they're going to look at you like, get out of here. And therein lies the problem. We want the American people. We believe that just don't really know what's being done to us or what's being planned for us. Because I really don't think that they would support this kind of bullying. So I'm really truly grateful. We're all very grateful for this opportunity to come on your show and bring this to the national attention, because we certainly are out here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We are so far out of sight, out of mind. We are just out here. But yet, if you think about what the military plans to do, it's just overwhelming. It's very concerning to us. And we have such high rates of cancer. I myself am a cancer survivor. I had cancer twice. And the people were very concerned about that. And the other thing is the military is known for arriving and taking indigenous lands and polluting it and then just turning their backs. Kelly Aiken Tenorio, the daughter of the late Chief Aiken, he was a demolition chief. And Kelly shares the story of deathbed confession. He says, I feel sorry for you guys for what we buried here. There's so much that was buried here that people don't even know about. And take, for example, the PCB containers that were left behind from World War II. You know, all these people were sitting around on them watching baseball games or even using them for barbecues, and then they found out that it was leaking PCB and all this kind of stuff. And it really took the voices of citizens. My organization was called in. We joined the local citizens of Tanatak to fight back, and we fought that battle with the help of Greenpeace Australia, who came to Saipan and fought with us, and just bringing the national attention to the problem and forcing the United States to listen to our government and to do something about cleaning up the PCB, which they attempted to do by, removing a lot of sand and all that kind of stuff. But, the damage is done because we have a lot of cancer for such a small community, and that's not the only thing. I mean, we're talking about toxicity that's created in the air and water. You plant your fruits and vegetables and you eat them, and if that comes from contaminated soil, obviously that's going to end up in your system. Now they're talking about conducting these deadly sonar testings in our waters. Pågan is known for these beautiful dolphins that frolic in the Pågan bays at 7:30 in the morning. So it really concerns me that we would not even get a chance to see them continue that because of the sonar testing that's being planned, and there are also whales that migrate in our waters. So when the military, the big, mighty U.S. military is up against you, the only thing we can do is to educate, sound the alarm, get people all over the world who can help us to stand beside us. And for our brothers and sisters in America, in the United States, you have the power that we don't. You have representatives in U.S. Congress. Please pick up the phone and call them. Please write them. Let them know what's happening to us here. Because I know that our lives matter. We deserve to live in good and clean environments, to raise our families. We're not asking for special treatment, anything more than what the families in the United States are entitled to. Even in our Constitution, it guarantees us a free and clear and healthy environment. I don't think that what the United States military is planning to do is in keeping with our Constitution. It will be a blatant violation of our Constitution. So I also appeal to our local leaders to take a stand. And also, some of them could be more aggressive or take a stronger stand in speaking out about this. But some of them are concerned about speaking out because they don't want to be perceived as being anti-military. But for God's sake, let's not be so concerned about people's perceptions, and let's get down to reality. If we don't speak up and put a stop to this, then our air, our lands, our waters would all be polluted. And what kind of life would we all have when we have no economy to speak of, because no one would ever want to come here? So this is living history. We are at a pivotal moment when we can speak up and say, no, we don't accept this. This is a human rights issue. We have a right to decide this whole thing, how we fight back. And I believe that our ancestors left us with a heritage and legacy, that we are the people of the islands. We should be the navigators. We are ocean-faring people. We need to control our destiny. We need to have the final say in how we should live. We need to protect our heritage, our culture. And all these bombings are not going to help us do that. They will destroy our civilization. They will destroy our identities. They will destroy who we are. And if they dispossess us of our lands, then we will cease to exist because we will have nowhere to call home.
Straight ahead, there's a long, long road that's nowhere, road that's nowhere. You're so long, all the sweetest thing I ever saw.
One thing I want to talk about with the militarization of Pågan, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, there's this battle that's been going on since the military's first proposals back in 2013, which prompted a federal lawsuit by the Tinian Women's Association, the Guardians of Ghani, Pågan Watch, and the Center for Biological Diversity, represented by Earth Justice. And last year, they lost their case in federal court and have now appealed to the Ninth Circuit. So I'm wondering if you could share the current status of the lawsuit today, as well as how our community can take action in resisting the militarization of Pågan.
Thank you for asking that question. My organization, Pågan Watch, is one of the three local indigenous groups who are co-plaintiffs. Tinian Women's Association is one, Pågan Watch is one, Guardians of Ghani is one, and our fourth co-plaintiff is the Center for Biological Diversity. And we are so blessed to have Earth Justice agree to represent us in this fight. The main thing about the lawsuit has to do with the United States military compliance with NEPA requirements. And I had touched upon this earlier when I talked about the need for them to inform the community of what their plans are to enable the comment period so that people would know as they read through the environmental impact statements what the actual impacts would be, and for them to reveal the cumulative impact of the trainings, and also to consider alternative training locations. And as I shared earlier, when the decision was made to relocate the Marines to Guam, the Navy had replied that they did not need any more training facilities outside of Guam. So we sued basically for segmenting the actual training, because I talked about how they tried to be really slick about this and carved up the whole training proposal into 5 different pieces so that they would try to minimize the horrific project that they're planning for our region. And so, unfortunately, we lost our case in district court. The federal judge did not find that where she dismissed a couple of our causes of action, but basically what it boiled down to was she did not believe that there was any NEPA violation at all, which we just can't fathom how she could come up with that decision. And so, yes, we did appeal the case, and so the Navy had asked for an extension on their time to reply to our brief, and so the circuit had granted them their request for a second extension. So we're at that point now where we're waiting to find out what's really going to happen, because what we envision happening is if they truly are complying with the requirements of NEPA, then they would find the violations are blatant. And so we hope that they would throw this out and have them start from scratch. At the very least, we're not kidding ourselves. As much as we would love to say, hey, in an ideal world, we would just stop the military. But you know what? We're not even thinking that we have the resources and the might to even stop them. They're cold, but maybe we can slow them down. That's what part of the reason why we have our hopes on a lawsuit, but we can't pin all our hopes on the lawsuit. We need to continue to look for alternative ways that we can fight back, which has a lot to do with educating our local community as well as the world. But what's happening, because I believe that the U.S. Congress has a big role to play in influencing the military. So that's why we want the American public, the American community, the American people to hear our voices, to hear our plight, and to, I invite them to come out and visit us and see for yourselves these blessed, beautiful islands, why we don't want them to be bombed to smithereens and turned into wastelands.
In doing research for this interview, one of the most interesting realities I came across was the multitude of information on the United States and China's struggle over Pacific domination, specifically the string of islands across the Pacific Ocean that are a focal point for both Washington and Beijing. And I'm wondering if you could share more about how the Mariana Islands are understood as an area in which power and dominance have been set to brush against each other long before the rest of the world becomes privy to these developing conflicts and power struggles.
I know. And see, that's the thing is, if it's not Korea, it's China. And will continue to be trampled upon as long as the superpowers decide that we are strategic locations in which they can battle over us. And it's unfortunate. It's not like we can pick up and move our island somewhere else to save ourselves. So one of my colleagues said, "Do you know of another planet we can move to?" It's very distressing, because I know that during the war of words between Trump and Kim Jong-un, there was the threats against Guam. Of course, we are just so close to Guam that we can't help but feel alarmed that if such threats were to take place, that obviously we would not be spared either. But then you talk about all these ramping up all these military facilities around us to a point where, like I said, we are ground zero. How is that a sure protection? It's also inviting. It's also the flip side of that. It's also putting us at a grave danger also, because when you talk about training exercises, there's accidents that happen or unexploded ordnance that are left behind that could explode upon impact. Yeah, I know that we're bullied because they also bring up China, but I can't believe that the whole defense of the United States rests solely on our area. I just think that the United States has all these powerful allies in the region. And yes, Okinawa, Japan, wants to reduce the population, but I strongly believe that there are other places in the world that can really come to the defense, and that we are certainly, that remains to be seen. I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, in closing, Cinta, I so appreciate your bravery and your knowledge on these topics and for sharing it with us. It's an enormous undertaking, and it's so important for us to hear what's happening for you and the people and the non-human kin that live with you in these islands. And in this closing time we have together, is there anything that you wanted to mention that you haven't been able to so far that you feel is really mandatory for us to be able to walk away with?
I just want to reiterate that we can't fight this fight alone, that we are all, global citizens. We all live on one planet, and that what happens to us today could be happening in your yard tomorrow. I sure hope not. But I believe that we all deserve to live in this world, in a peaceful world. And so I'm just inviting, your listeners, everyone, to please help us, support us. If they could help us fund our fight and our lawsuit, they can contact me about how to do that. My email is Cinta, CINTAM, like Mary, Kaipat, KAIP like Peter, AT like Tom, @gmail.com. They can contact me through my email if they wish to help us fight back by donating, so we can continue with our lawsuit and take it as far as we can. And also, I just wanted to mention that what I even shared with you was just, a small portion of, the actual, there's so much information. That's part of the problem, is that they just want to just keep us, bombard us with so much information you don't even know what's coming or going. But I'm very fortunate that I do work alongside very smart and caring people that I would encourage you to invite onto your program, because they will definitely enrich this discussion and enlighten the people more. Thank you so much, Ayana. Olomai Sudusumasi.
Thank you, Cinta, and we stand with you and want to support you and garner more support through our networks at For the Wild. I agree that what you're fighting for is you're really fighting for all people. We are connected by the oceans. And I think about the bombing that's happening, off the coast of California, Alaska, and beyond. And if we can't stop it in one place, they will be coming for other places next. We can't run away from this, even if we think that it's not happening to us. And so I think that's a really important point. And thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of For the Wild podcast. I'm audio producer Andrew Storrs. The music you heard today was by Pura Fe, along with some traditional recordings from the Mariana Islands. I'd like to thank our host, Ayana Young. The research and writing for today's episode was done by Francesca Glassbell. Our social media coordinator is Aaron Wise, and our music coordinator is Carter Lou McElroy. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Through the mountains like a river.